Namaskar and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sat means truth, logos means a study or science, Sattology means a science of truth or study of truth. If you want to, an opposite of that is mythology, which means a science of fake lie imagination or study of fake lie imagination. I have written 11 books. If you search Sattology on Amazon, you'll see all my books. And I have a very, very special guest, a very good friend. And without delay, let us welcome Shri Abhijit Iyer Mitra.
Buddha be with you, myself.
Abhijit, the American pressure on India in terms of advising, I know the Indian government is not, governments operate in a different way, but the media pressure and the Ukrainian pressure that why India is not opposing Russia in a big way. How much factual is that? Like, what is going on? Because India has provided 36 million tons of aid to Ukraine, food and
I don't think that 36 million tons is correct. It's more like about 3-4 tons total, but lots of, quantity wise it's big, but not in tonnage. The pressure realistically is coming from 2-3 countries. Okay, it comes from countries like the UK, which is forceful but doesn't carry much weight in Delhi, and other countries like, say, Ireland. Ireland's been very vocal about it. Belgium seems to have been quite vocal about it, except, if you go to government buildings here, the first question you're meant to ask is essentially, where is Ireland? What is Belgium? Is it even a country? So those are the ones that count. America has been the big problem. And it's been the big problem for a reason. There are some islands of government which have not been pressurizing India, and they're very understanding of the situation India is in. However, there are other segments of the government that are not so understanding. And the problem really has been a sort of, mixed pressure, where one part of the government is saying, it's fine, you do your thing, we understand. And the other part of the government is saying, no, you do what we tell you to do. And I think the mood to comply is non-existent, but there is this sort of irritation. Who do we listen to here? Who's in charge? So that's been a very big problem. The Germans and the French, you could say, are the other two really big, meaningful powers in all of this. From day one, they've been completely, relaxed and not interested in forcing anything down India's throat.
There is a the Biden's press conferences are in news a lot nowadays, and there are very funny comments by Americans and also by various politicians. Now, is there a what is the sense of Biden's press conferences on Indian audience or the world? How do they take it as?
So, the amazing thing about Biden is he kind of is emblematic of the dilemma that India faces. It's like, do we listen to the president or do we not? Because this fellow seems to be doddering and isn't in control of either what he says or what he thinks. Okay, on the one hand, he says Putin needs to go. Then he tries walking back his comment. You see his briefing notes, which clearly say he's meant to walk back his comment. But then he goes and confirms again that he wants Putin gone. Right? So this is the kind, I think everybody now realizes that Biden is not in charge. The problem is, who exactly is in charge? See, we get a lot of vicarious pleasure on Twitter saying, Biden is not really in charge. Okay, fine. But for the government, the question is, if he's not in charge, who is? Who do we deal with? Who do we listen to? And nobody seems to know the answer to that.
So there was a you're absolutely right. There was a incident like yesterday. It has happened, covered in many news portals in the US. Somehow I don't believe in American media outlets now. I do not know what they are saying is a fact or it's a propaganda. Now, the regular count they come out with of all the casualties of Russians in Ukraine is completely different than what Russian official media puts out to be. And the Russian media version is completely different. India being a neutral country, I think the Arnab Goswami's show has been very appreciated in the US now, and where he was able to bring all sides together and quieten everybody up. So, like in terms of listening to everyone. So do you think that the American viewpoint on this entire conflict is a little bit skewed, or is it being manipulated by everyone?
I think the Americans are much more, except for, say, Tucker Carlson. Okay. Or, I mean, if you take North America as a whole, Tucker Carlson, maybe Grey Zone News, in UK, maybe Spiked, things like that have been providing an alternate viewpoint. In India, I think there's only one or two video clips that went viral. One was, I think it was by Z News, and one was by Arnab Goswami. And it had more to do with the fact that those were the only two clips that were actually, well, there was third times now. Let's not forget Mr. McAdams, who got uh, yelled at for things he did not say. Poor chap. But yeah, I think that was the most viral meme, the most viral episode of the entire war. But look, in India, I think what you have to realize is I never realized how much pro-Russian sentiment there was. And it has nothing to do with 1971. 1971 and the Russian help given to India in the Bangladesh war is used as a post-facto justification. But generally, I think Indians generally have a sense of if they're being taken for a ride or not. And the general sense here seems to be that Russia is not really taking us for a ride, but America is. I think the anger there is that, for America can do what it wants for for Ukraine and to Russia. The question is, the anger is coming from the fact that don't pass the cost of that onto us, right? Because petrol today has for the first time gone over 100 rupees per liter, which it has never gone that high in history. And the sheer anger and fury about it is ridiculous.
No, absolutely. Like the African Union, 16 countries came up against the entire sanction diplomacy of the Americans, because it is not just American, it is affecting the whole world, American sanctions. And it's not just USA. Now, somehow Americans are finding gas cheaper in Tijuana than in San Diego right now. And so they can see it. It never happened in the history where the gas in Tijuana was cheaper than USA. Never happened. So even Mexico is managing their finances well.
So are they crossing the border to get put fuel?
That's right. That's right. They go to the border.
Nice.
Actually, what they did.
So, the only time I've actually seen this is in Israel, where they'll cross the border to get their shawarmas and falafel, because on this side of the border, it'll be like some 15, 20 shekels. And on the Palestinian side of the border, it'll be something like 2 to 5 shekels. So they just cross over to the Palestinian side, eat their lunch, and then come back to the Israeli side. Now, of course, ever since the separation barrier went up, it's gone. But before, that's what used to happen.
So one of the things is like the Indian Indian response, diplomatic response has been very steady this time. They are just said we are neutral, and that's what US is questioning. That in the front of Ukraine suffering, why are you neutral? Why don't you take side of the new Ukrainians? Well, India has taken a position on Ukraine, and it is providing them humanitarian assistance, whatever it is. So what is the Indian view on American pressurizing tactics on all these things?
Like I said, we don't know. We don't know who's ordering the pressurizing, because most of the trusted people are saying, chill, don't worry. But then a lot of new actors that we think, we don't know. I think the problem isn't the duplicity of voices coming out of Washington. The problem is we don't understand or know what their power or their authority in Washington is. Do they have the authority to even be saying what they're saying? Right. So that becomes very problematic.
Also, one more thing is the public calls of assassination of foreign leaders. I mean, US has always engaged in those targeted killings or assassinations. Now that is being seen negatively here in the campuses also, that is uncivilized for a country. Even Anthony Blinken said that a US will never use chemical weapons, but there is a history of orange agent being used in Vietnam. So what is India's stance on American credibility on chemical and biowarfare weapons?
So, Agent Orange, I don't think entirely qualifies as chemical warfare. I think the specific thing about chemical warfare is it has to affect the person immediately, whereas Agent Orange had knockdown effects later on. Just like depleted uranium shells in Iraq, starting from the Iraq war onwards. The Indian position on chemical weapons has generally been extremely ambiguous. And it's ambiguous for a reason, because we're not particularly sure who, for example, carried out the attack in Syria. Because Syria was 2-3 of those attacks there were some of the biggest attacks. And what had happened out there, because India was actually tracking that very well, people in India were, I wouldn't say India was, but people in India were, they were tracking Russian complaints of chemical weapons use before that big attack. Was that the Dera chemical attack? Or, well, you remember where it suddenly came on TV with lots of people dying, and that's what precipitated the NATO intervention and Russia moving in and things like that. But we had been tracking all those smaller attacks up north, which incidentally Russia had reported, and the West was refusing to consider. And then suddenly this one big attack happens that was, we suspect it was the Syrian government. I think in private in India, they will agree it was the Syrian government that carried it out, which NATO went apeshit over. So the problem in India is we don't think that America or whatever will use those weapons, but it will certainly create an environment where if Ukraine uses it, it will be attributed to Russia by the overwhelming majority of the media, and it will invite some kind of increased pressure on India to act, which becomes problematic for us because we have no means of verifying these things on the ground. So we have to depend on other people's verifications.
A very valid point, because you never know, like after the Iraq WMD episode, the whole world doesn't trust American media at all, and the Western media purposely the American psycho, I don't know what to call the name, UK and Australia, like the uh, you know totally dependent, whatever US does they do that on any case, and Canada too. Now in this entire episode, the global changing the position of dollar, what is in your view is the position of dollar today, or the view of the dollar? Because Americans can take away at any time you want, any time.
Mm. I see. The thing again is what America. You remember we spoke about this, I think, the last to last episode. What America is doing isn't going to affect America in the next, say, 4 to 5 years. but it's going to affect the American story in the next 15 to 20 to 25 years. Because what's happening is when you shepherd a global commons, you have a responsibility to be extremely reserved with using it. And you have to use it not based on your foreign policy interests, but based on what those common goals are. Right? I think the net result of this is there is now zero trust in international reserve holdings. There is zero trust in the global commons that are shepherded by the West. And what you'll see is an immediate diversification of India's means and methods of storage and dissemination of wealth. The second thing that you're going to see probably much more rapidly, that's going to have an impact in the next year or so, is that India is now going to insist that all data that relates to India be localized within India. So whatever happens on, say, Twitter or Facebook or whatever, will have to be stored in India. Anything that requires identification, and mind you, if you're logging into Facebook and Twitter and things like that, creating an account, you have to give your number and so on and so forth, which is sort of personal data, and that will have to be stored in India. So you're going to see a splitting of the global internet, number one. You're not going to see a great wall of China, but you are going to see a splitting of the global internet. And the second thing that you're going to see is a sort of diversification of the global commons, where everything will have an Eastern or Southern equivalent to it that is not related to or controlled by the West.
That's what I think Americans are also anticipating, that the reserve dollar as a reserve currency is in danger. Most of the many reports I've seen now. Now, it is really not affecting the US government much right now. And you correctly said it's going to take time. What happens to the gold standard? Now, ruble is based on gold standard. We all know that now. Russia moved off of dollar around 10 years back. Is based on gold standard. So if the ruble is calculated against the gold, how come it is falling against the dollar? I don't understand that. Or dollar is falling actually.
Well, I don't understand fiscal policy either. So you'll have to ask me some other question. Fiscal policy isn't my forte.
Okay.
I've never understood money. If I did, I'd be much richer than I am right now.
So the military preparedness of multiple, like the countries like India, which were trading in dollar, will it get affected with this dollar, with change to ruble or other things with other countries also?
Again, wrong question. I don't know.
Two wrong questions in a row. Okay. So coming back to the American perception, American media perception in India. How does the India views American media, Fox News, CNN, and other things? Other than
I don't think, even Tucker Carlson, there's no visibility of Tucker Carlson in India, right? There's no visibility of, say, Grey Zone News or any of those things in India either. Even the alternate American media isn't really watched or spoken about in India. Tucker Carlson is a very English-speaking India phenomenon, restricted to the internet. So maximum reach would be about 2 to 3 million English speakers in cities at any given point of time. Excuse me. And even there, it will be the occasional person who's remotely interested in American news, which is non-existent. I mean, you tell me how many, you keep coming to India. You tell me how many Indians are actually interested in politics or anything, American politics or anything like that here.
Nobody.
Except for, Will Smith slapping Chris Rock. Okay, so that will go viral. But other than that, they don't know the difference between, say, Ro Khanna and Chris Rock. If you say there's a guy called Ro Khanna in America, you're like, Ro, like seriously? What, row your boat? But that's about it.
My question, you answered the next question will be, like, I know that See, Americans think that their media is, everybody in India is watching them, such important discussions they are doing, the Five, the Gutfeld show, and all those people. But India has no visibility into any of those things.
Look, India is not visible to them and they are not visible to India. Right? I there's genuinely no interest outside these little sarcastic clips that would come out every now and then. I would dare say that, those situations gone wrong, or car crash videos, or bloopers videos would be much more popular. I mean, nobody gives a shit about what's happening in America, in India. That's the sad reality of it. There are people like us who, I mean, even amongst the English speaking people in India, there's very few of us who actually worry about foreign policy and what's happening in other countries. Most people, even in our social strata, don't give a damn. They only give a damn if they can go to San Francisco and buy the latest Prada, or go to New York and buy the latest, I don't know what, good, acha watch, Patek Philippe, or then go to Switzerland to buy that. So what, I mean, tell me something you buy in New York.
Even those stores,
well, something.
Even those
But
stores,
other than that, they don't care.
I mean, this will be a rude shock to the ego of many Americans who are watching this show. That Indians have like 300 million people. They think they are the center of the entire world, and 1.4 billion people don't even notice them. It's like they just pass
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. And even there, you notice India is obsessed with India. You look at any Indian news channel, 99.999% of the coverage is only about India. It's not about the rest of the world. I mean, it's not just America. We don't give a shit about it. I think maximum we give a shit about is Pakistan. And that too, the only reason we give a shit about Pakistan because it's a sort of hangover with some of our intellectuals and things, so-called intellectuals and things like that. Otherwise, even Pakistan won't make it to the news. There's riots happening in Sri Lanka right now. They're running out of fuel. They're running out of food. They're running out of electricity. And there's no discussion on Indian TV. It's like it's happening in another planet. So, I mean, it is what it is.
The NRIs seem to think more than what Indians think. It's like that there was a movie song कुली में था ना, सारी दुनिया का बोझ हम उठाते हैं, लोग आते चले जाते हैं. So it's like people are just creating self-created burdens on their own mind. The rest of the world doesn't care about it. Now, one question about, see, the American media has a huge impact. Just last question and we'll go. American media has a huge impact on Mexican psyche and Canadian psyche and European psyche. But as far as Asia goes, we just took an example of India, it doesn't matter. So what about the other countries in Asia? What do they think about the American media, productions?
I've actually never noticed that. Right? So, for example, if I go to Sri Lanka, I don't really notice what their TV is talking about. I can tell you Bangladesh is very self-obsessed, and maximum they're only concerned about what's happening in India, maximum, or sometimes Burma. Burma only because of the Rohingya refugee crisis, right? I mean, Bangladesh, remember, Bangladesh is about 200 million people. It's like 2/3 the size of America, technically.
Wow.
Right? You look at Pakistan, there's furious stuff happening in Pakistan right now. They think the prime minister is going to get sacked. Do you think they have any time to think about what's happening anywhere else? No. You look at Southeast Asia, they're all very self-contained. They don't have this obsession with what the West is saying, except maybe Singapore, right? Singapore does. But in my observation, South Asia and Southeast Asia have very little concern about American politics or American foreign policy than they do with, say, American entertainment. They're not even concerned with the Oscars, they're only concerned with what comes out of the Oscars, or rather, what went into the Oscars.
Thank you so much, Abhijit, and thank you for all the viewers for watching. You got the answer that India doesn't think too much about, or Asia rather. India is one of the major countries there, doesn't think too much about what American media puts out. And I really appreciate that because there is nothing that we know that comes out. But thank you so much. Keep watching, do subscribe, and let us know your feedback. Namaste.